Hey, folks, welcome back here on the Entrepreneurs Circle. We have a really interesting and unique show here for you. Actually, you're going to be hearing quite a few shows here coming from Podcast Row from my good buddy Donnie Zolden. We're running all this out of Stand Up New York. So you may have heard me interview other people, people that I've met on that network, on other shows. And Donnie actually has been on my show, so look for that, episode 21 of the Entrepreneur Circle, if you want to get to know him a little bit better. But today, our very first guest here is this really cool dude named Elias Davis. How are you, brother?
Amazing, amazing. Nice to be here today.
Yeah, you excited to get the day
Super
started?
excited, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to get into your story and, tell the good folks at home what you're all about and what BNSG Capital is about. So how we like to start the show is all about you, and we'll get into your company in a second. But let's talk about you. What was the superhero's origin as far as like that radioactive bug that bit you and turned you into an entrepreneur and then got that mindset right?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So I guess it goes back all the way to probably where I was born and raised. I mean, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I was there until about the age of 15 when unfortunately my father passed away. My mother decided to move the family to Lima, Peru, which is where she's from. Moved there for a couple years, and really, I mean, everyone in my family is a doctor. So I was kind of born into the family where either you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a businessman, and businessman has no definition really. So once I started college, it was pre-med, ended up starting a health tech company called We Met Up, which was it was kind of Facebook meets the medical dental industry. And at the time, we had to basically spend a ton of money on outsourcing a lot of the development to a company in Boston. And I think that was kind of the first indication that not only did I have the entrepreneurial bug and see opportunity outside of becoming a doctor to have some form of participation in the medical field, but I kind of also wanted to get some experience in the technology, computer science aspect, because I felt like, if I had these, visions, ideas, I wanted to have the skills to develop it myself. And that was kind of the origin of, I'm going to go from essentially starting to become a doctor, transitioning into technology and leveraging those technology skills to, eventually I interned at Pfizer in computational chemistry. I then worked on Wall Street here at Credit Suisse. My first official job out of college was as a product manager at Google. And then kind of the rest is history, right? I continued transitioning in from a big company to a smaller company, working in product, working directly for CEOs, and then switching from the operator side into the investment side.
Awesome. Yeah. That's jam-packed, brother, man. That's a nice, succinct history being told there. I love it. So what was it? Take us back to the day when you started to realize, this is my strength. It sounds like you're very left brain, logic, process oriented. When did you start to realize this is my superpower and I'm going to start to leverage this to build business? Because as an associate for BNSG Capital, I'm sure, there isn't necessarily an easy day, right? Except for what we're doing now. This is a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, tell us what, when you started to realize I'm going to leverage my strengths, I'm going to double down on this and start to build, where you are now.
It's a good question. So I think, especially early on in my days in college, obviously a lot of what I was invested in personally and professionally was really checking all the boxes I needed to be the perfect candidate to get into medical school. So the first summer after my freshman year, I did a summer medical program at Duke Med called SMDEP, which is like a diversity program for minority students in the medical and dental, or interested in becoming medical or dental professionals. And I then ended up interning at Pfizer. And I think, a lot of the time that I spent figuring out exactly what I needed to do to become, the best medical school candidate was really about leveraging my network, like figuring out who within my network is already a professional, who can I ask to intern for, gain shadowing experience, and really leveraging my network to check all those boxes out. And I figured at one point that I could leverage that same network to build out businesses.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened when I started my first company, which is wemetup.com. I figured that a lot of my network was, yes, they were medical professionals, but they were entrepreneurial minded individuals also that saw a little further than just becoming the doctor I always dreamt to become.
Yeah.
And at that point, I figured, you know what, if I can be successful at continuing to check these boxes, I can probably leverage that same network to pursue my other interests on the entrepreneurial side of things.
Okay. So as you started to build and understand the importance of networking, was there anyone that was integral to, when you got to a crossroad, like, wait a minute, this guy or gal is actually someone that I want to attach myself to? Was it? Yeah. Tell us to that.
A million percent. I mean, there've been many individuals in my short-lived career, I would say, that were extremely pivotal in getting me to where I am today. I'll speak about two individually. One is actually a close friend of my brother's. His name is Ernie Mendowski. He was, actually the individual that helped me make the decision to officially switch from, okay, I'm pre-med in college to I'm switching my major to computer science. I'm going to take the leap of faith and go on this like crazy business entrepreneurial path of the unknown. It was funny because I started college at the University of Central Florida. I ended up transferring then to the University of Rochester. And when I transferred, I actually transferred as a pre-med student. And when I got there, I believe the first event for another career prep program I was in, that's just phenomenal, called MLT, got back to school. I think it was the third or fourth week of school, essentially Sunday night, the last day before the last day of ad drop, to figure out what my class schedule was going to be. And I call up Ernie and I say, look, I just came back from this conference. I'm super motivated. I'm interested in so many things. How do I know I want to be a doctor? Why should I just not change my major to computer science and take this path of the unknown? And he said, look, like, if you really are kind of distressed and unknown of what you want to do and why you want to do this, I think this is a perfect path of you switching your major, gaining additional expertise in an industry that you really know nothing about, but you've always been interested in. And if you ever do want to end up going back into the medical field, you can do that. So it's funny, I can like picture that specific moment in my mind when I freaked out. I went back home at like 11 p.m. the night before, switched all of my classes from all pre-med to all computer science, and that was my junior year of college.
That's crazy.
So,
wow.
And then the other individual is an individual named Eric Reiner, which is...
Yeah, wait, let's pause on Eric Reiner for a second, because I want to ask you a question about Ernie.
Yeah.
So what was it that Ernie was doing that made you confident in that decision to say, you know what, I want to be where he is, and I want to do what he's doing? Was there something like that going on?
100%. So Ernie is, by the way, an individual that I've known since basically I was born. I mean, he was a family friend of our family, also Peruvian, also from Miami. Okay. One of my brother's best friends growing up as well. And he, even though he was, I believe, an industrial engineering major in college, he always was involved with something entrepreneurial, whether it was baking specialty challahs out of his kitchen and selling them to any person he could get to, or if it was something called a dope which was a glazed donut from Dunkin' Donuts with ice cream in the middle stuck into a panini maker and selling them to whoever would buy them.
Nice.
And it was phenomenal. I mean, this guy had brilliant ideas, and he had a passion for food, but a passion for entrepreneurship, and he merged that, and I think that was probably one of the first examples that I wanted to kind of follow in.
Gotcha. So you always sort of watched him from afar. You were on your path, but he always sort of inspired you and sort of got you jazzed about being an entrepreneur and a business owner. So that's great. That's awesome.
100%.
It's so important. So yeah, let's move on to Erica.
Eric Reiner.
Oh, Eric. Yep.
So Eric is an individual that I've also kind of looked up to for a large period of time. I mean, I haven't known him as long as I have known Ernie, but he is an individual that's been kind of by my side, my mentor, someone I've looked up to specifically in the venture capital world for a while. So he started his career off at Insight Venture Partners. and then became an operator at a handful of different startups, and then came back now to start Sinai Ventures. So he's a partner at Sinai. And I can kind of track it all the way back from my, I think, first or second week at Google when I, became reading about venture capital, learning more about it, and reached out to him. I grew up or have known Eric Reiner's wife from Miami for a very long period of time as well. So I reached out to Eric and I said, look, like, I'm interested in learning more about this space. I would love to kind of learn more about what your experience is in. And I think, that relationship continued to develop over time until about some period, like, close to the end of last year, when he started the fund, Sinai Ventures, gave me the opportunity to intern and come in and work on a handful of different projects, and actually made the introduction to BNSG Capital to get me the job which I am today.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously we're very close. We're good friends now, and we collaborate on many of the work that a lot of the work that we're doing between my fund and his. But yeah, that's another individual that kind of look up to, follow on. He's my mentor.
Awesome. So was it he that inspired you to get into the VC space, or were you always interested, or what was the thing that sparked your interest in that?
That's a great question. It's hard to kind of track it down to the origin of what the day was when I was like, VC is cool. That's what I want to do forever. The way that I see VC, and actually a lot of people ask me why I'm in VC instead of going to be an operator to be the CEO of a new company of my own. And I think the answer is VC is the perfect opportunity to gain the operational experience without actually starting or being the CEO of a company. And so I can elaborate on that because BNSG Capital to date has close to 50 companies in its portfolio. And as early stage investors, a lot of what we do is we actually go into the trenches, roll up our sleeves, and help these founders build their companies. And so on top of, being an investor, meeting individuals, and again, utilizing the networking skills that I continue to rely on as my strengths, it's a perfect opportunity to also continue building operational experiences. So eventually, if I do want to go out and leave VC and be an operator again and start a company, I not only have a depth of operational experience from working with portfolio companies, but again, it's a way to continue building a network that you can leverage later on down the line.
Beautiful. I love that. I love it. So, okay, let's do it. Let's jump right into BNSG Capital and what it is you guys do in your portfolio, because I actually know a lot of the companies that you have in your portfolio. I had Sammy Courtwright from FitSpot on my show, and I'm looking forward to interviewing more of those founders. But yeah, so let's get into that. I love the idea that you said you start to personally gain a ton of experience as an operator. So it's like in your sleep, it's going to get to the point where you can just start a company and operate it. It'll be easy because you've seen so many different, things thrown at you, right? So you're going to actually have a wealth of knowledge to help more and more people. So let's jump into from the perspective of a founder who comes to you with an idea. So are they, they're in various stages, right? Some of them probably a little more ahead than others. But let's go to someone who doesn't have a whole lot put together, but you love the idea. Can you walk us down that path?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess I'll tell you a little about BNSG and our strategy, and then we'll go down that path. Yeah. So BNSG Capital is an early stage fund. When I say early stage, we do anything from pre-seed to seed to convertible notes into Series A, which essentially means, the earliest we've done is a guy with an idea on a napkin, all the way to a company that probably does $2 or $3 million a year in sales. And again, every single stage requires us to put in a different amount of work into rolling up our sleeves and actually being active within the company. We now have some companies in our portfolio that are large enough, which honestly they don't need our help anymore. But given the fact that we are an early stage fund, a lot of the companies that we invest in, actually Sammy is an incredible founder, and John, her co-founder, also is an incredible founder, and they're the perfect example. We came in pretty early on. They're doing phenomenally well. They're continuing to grow. And we've, I actually work out of Sammy's office a good amount.
Awesome.
And Sammy and John not only are founders that we've invested in, but actually they're personal friends of mine as well. I mean, they've had dinner in my apartment before. But I mean, going back to your initial question, which is what does that look like for us?
Yeah.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, we have a check size. So we've invested anything from, I believe, 100,000 to close to 1.5 or $2 million. Obviously, the size of the company, the stage in the company, indicates what check size makes the most sense for that stage of company. But we see all investments as equal. So whether it's a guy with an idea on a napkin and they need capital to start hiring engineers to build out their vision, or if it's John and Sammy that are doing, X revenue, are raising X amount of capital, every single founder, regardless of their stage, specifically early stage, they need some form of help, right? They always have limited resources. They always need the additional hands on board, and that's what we're there for. So.
Yeah, so let's. I love that. Thanks for framing that out. From the napkin all the way to operators who just want to get to the next level. So let's talk to those people who are listening who have a business and they're in one. They fall into that category somehow. Well, can you walk them through the process? The underwriting, how you vet them. How does that all work?
Great question.
Yeah.
So at BNSG Capital, we specifically wanted to add a very structured process. So in comparison to many other funds that might not necessarily have a very structured process of 2 or 3 week from the time you meet the founder until you make a final decision on whether the fund is going to invest or not, we really wanted to put that in because obviously we don't want to drag out any conversations. We know the founders are spending a lot of time trying to fundraise, a lot of time trying to operate their business. We think it's the most responsible to treat founders as if we were the founders ourselves, right? And so what our process looks like is the second we are introduced to a founder, we schedule an initial phone screen. After that phone screen, if everything looks good, we basically request a list of documents, everything from an investment deck to a financial model to a competitor analysis. I mean, there's a whole list of things that we ask for. We are a data-driven fund, so a lot of the decisions we make are based on the data that we're seeing in the industry or about the company specifically. So that company then goes through a filtering process. So we have like a proprietary rubric that we've built, which essentially is a scoring card on what this company has and how many points it gets out of arbitrarily 20. Gotcha. So some of the things on that is like, the team, the product, intellectual property, the industry, the market size, yada, yada. So we go through that process. If they go through on the next process, we then invite them to kind of like our diligence process, which is essentially we use all the materials that they've sent over and we put together a very comprehensive investment memo, which is probably in like the 10 to 15 page range of a very, very deep dive into this company's financials, its history, its competitors, its team, it's just about everything about this company. And then we've instituted a process where every single Monday for about 2 to 3 hours, BNSG gets together and we have something called an investment committee, which is essentially the opportunity to walk through with all the partners and all the members of the BNSG team, what the team thinks of the company that we're evaluating as an investment. We have these meetings every single Monday. And that's kind of basically the process. So from beginning to end, when the investment committee evaluates the opportunity and makes a final decision on the investment, it's anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks or so.
So that's awesome. Wow, only 3 to 4 weeks. So, how does that done? Is there a majority vote? How do you guys decide if you're going to invest or not?
I mean, there's like 3 or 4 members of the investment committee. I think everyone's opinion is valid. I mean, obviously, like I'm an associate. There's another associate in Montreal called Daniel. There's 2 partners, one that's extremely active, and we kind of just have a conversation about it. I mean, at that point, once the conversation reaches the investment committee, everyone on the team has probably met the founders in person, if not had a large, lengthy conversation with them over the phone, so they understand what we're looking at. It's not like everyone at the bottom does all the work and then it gets to the committee and no one kind of knows what's going on. So everyone.
So you never had an instance where, you know, like you were passionate about investing in a certain company and then, you know, somebody else was like, absolutely not. And, you know, you've never had everybody pretty much gets along and agrees, you know, collectively.
I mean, no, I think, I mean, everyone does get along. That's why we work really well together.
That's great.
But I think, look, disagreement is part of building a strong team. Yeah. And I think just like any founding company, venture funds also have investment committees and members that disagree on many different things. We definitely don't agree on everything, but at the end of the day, how we think about it is if you disagree with someone on a topic, whether it's a company that we're looking to invest in, or really anything we do as a fund, as long as you can make sense of it and explain your reasoning as to why you disagree, that's what's important. I think if you know, I'll speak for BNSG, but I think it's any fund or any company, right? Like if you have a disagreement with an individual, but you can back that up with why you think that, I think communication and having those thoughtful conversations is what makes teams strong.
Yeah. So, but you do have one or two final decision makers. If anything happens, there's like somebody that says, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to move forward. It makes sense. The data's there. But then...
Yeah, I think, look, I wouldn't necessarily, yes, I'm an associate, there's definitely a partner. Yeah. And, I mean, even though, you know, sometimes I might, the partner has the final decision. Yeah. But I would say that everyone's opinion is valued equally. And I think that's what makes, you know, our fund stand out for sure.
So you guys are active, right? Investors in that.
Yep.
Do you have passive investors that contribute to the fund as well?
No. So BNSG's capital is all. So we call ourselves a venture fund, but we're essentially in structure a family office. Okay. And the fact that all the capital we're investing are the two founders' capital.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I was gonna try to talk from that side and see if anybody wanted to come and be a part of that as well from a passive perspective. But so we did walk through, and because you sort of gave a model of the walkthrough and the path for someone like a FitSpot. What about the guy that has the napkin? Like, how do you underwrite something that doesn't even necessarily exist yet?
That's a great question. And I think, I mean, the high level answer is, look, we evaluate every single opportunity, how it's presented to us, right? Like when FitSpot's initial investment was made through BNSG, I wasn't at the fund yet, so I can't speak too much about that. Mm-hmm. But I think I believe I've been at BNSG for about 8 months now. Mm-hmm. One of the investments we've made since I joined has been in a company that was essentially two guys with an idea on a napkin. Mm-hmm. Our check size was smaller than our average check size. Yeah. But we are bullish on strong teams and strong ideas. And the process is relatively similar. I mean, we still go through the traditional process of meeting the founders, filtering the deal through our filtering process, putting together an investment memo, asking for a lot of the material. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, we're early stage investors. So we do understand the risk, that of an early stage.
Yeah. So in that model or scenario, does it look more like BNSG will become partners because this person doesn't have the resources or the connections and they need to build a team, they need a COO, they need all these things that you could potentially give them? Could you act as business coaches in that scenario, or does that ever work out that way?
Yeah. So I guess, how would you define business coaches?
Well, someone who would make the connections, tell them the structure. Maybe they don't have any experience of, putting a business plan together, but they have a brilliant idea. Things like that,
Yeah.
Just sort of someone who doesn't have a ton of experience building a business. Would you guys step in that role for them, or?
So that's a great question. I think obviously we have 50 companies and limited resources on our team as well. So we wouldn't invest in a company to overhaul and build a business for a founder. Mm-hmm. But I think, look, at the end of the day, our responsibility as investors is to help these companies in whatever way that we can, in whatever way that they need it. So whether it's, helping them figure out their financials and building financial models, or if it's figuring out their cap table because they've raised cash from too many different types of investors and now need to recap the whole business, or if it's with hiring good individuals. I mean, COOs, or VPs of engineering, product, etc. We definitely leverage our network for the companies that we invest in, and I think that's we're extremely active. We're proud investors in the fact that we actually roll up our sleeves and help our companies in whatever they need whatever they need.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm curious about your portfolio. So you have all these different categories. The one that I'm most interested in is real estate, because I'm a real estate investor. So I see you have like Keo and Build Up. Do you do any work with them personally, or you're aware of them obviously in your portfolio?
Yeah. So I haven't worked directly with them that much. There's one company which I'd love to bring up. A company called Rowdier. They're out of Israel. So what they do is they have engineered a they have a pattern on it, but essentially it's like a communication platform that works on top of the Wi-Fi of a hotel. So essentially today you go to a hotel, you check in, you have, potentially a good experience, but mostly sometimes a bad experience. You then leave the hotel and put a bad review on TripAdvisor, right? And at the end of the day, a hotel really cares a lot about their reviews, because that's how they attract, new potential clients and customers. And so what Rowdier has done is they've built in a communication platform onto, above the layer of the Wi-Fi. So for example, you check in at they're in the Pods hotels in New York City. So imagine you check in, you log onto the Pod hotel's Wi-Fi, and you essentially get a messaging widget on your mobile device that could be used to communicate directly with the hotel, and the hotel can communicate with you. So for example, if you need towels in your room, right? You can click on your phone, click on the widget, message them directly. The towels will be up in just a couple of minutes. Or if the hotel wants to kind of probe you and ask you how your experience has been during your stay at the hotel, if you say amazing, then phenomenal. But if you say, not great, like I had this hiccup because the breakfast wasn't as good as I expected, or I asked for towels and they never showed up, it's a perfect opportunity for the hotel to kind of improve your experience while you're still at the hotel.
Yeah.
Right? Because once you leave the hotel, it's very hard for the hotel to re-engage you and change your experience. But while you're still at the hotel can do just about anything to help you leave the hotel satisfied.
Gotcha. So it's basically the next generation of picking up that nightstand phone or the intercom or whatever, because it's modern day mobile, right? You're on the go, and it's instantaneous, right? So wherever you are in the hotel, they can contact you, see if everything's going well. But you also mentioned that company. Did they do anything as far as the Wi-Fi? You said, or they just leverage that for that tool?
So they leverage that for that tool.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example, right?
Yeah.
It's really, if I told you every single time you want to use this platform, you need to go into a hotel and download an app, a lot of people wouldn't do that, right? Because at the end of the day, downloading app is a pain. You don't want to do this. You have 50 other apps on your phone. It's extra work. This leverages the existing Wi-Fi to allow the easy the easy input and kind of ability to talk directly to your client without the client or customer needing to download anything on their device.
Yeah, I love that. I've experienced that before. I don't know if it was what is it, Rowdier?
Routier, Routier.
Yeah, it's very cool, and I have to agree that the experience, now that you mention it, was memorable, and I loved it. So that's a good. I'm glad you guys jumped into that one.
Yeah, great founder.
Were there any other companies you wanted to talk about that you guys are investing in?
So Backtracks is another one of our companies.
Yeah,
so
I had a meeting with those dudes.
Did you meet with Jonathan?
Yeah, we're still talking. So yeah, we haven't, but yeah.
He's
I met Jonathan.
Phenomenal guy. So that's the perfect example. So we met Jonathan earlier this year. We were one of the early investors in their I guess $2.1 million round that they announced earlier
Yeah.
this year. We're super excited about what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can announce or what I can announce, but they're working on some really, really exciting, incredible things. I mean, Jonathan and his team are phenomenal.
Yeah.
They really have a competitive advantage. I mean, they've spent a long period of time on the engineering of what they're building. And I mean, I don't know how much you've been following the trends in the podcast space,
Of course.
but
We're
I mean,
here.
obviously, yeah. I mean, Spotify,
Yeah.
Anchor,
Yeah.
all the acquisitions. I mean, look, I'm super excited about what they're doing. Jonathan's phenomenal. I actually speak to him on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a perfect example, right? We made the investment probably 2 or 3 months ago.
Okay.
And we've made many, many intros. We actually introduced him to Podcast Row, so that's why he ended up flying into New York and coming to the event.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that, because that's how I met him.
No, a pleasure. And they're doing phenomenal. They're hiring individuals. They're building their team. Business development opportunities are coming in. I mean, so things are going great. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that the backbone of your company is really tech, because that's really the way to move forward. In this day and age, you don't want to be left behind, and you guys are on top of everything, so it's great. So we're getting to the segment of the show where we talk about our recipe for success. What are a couple of things that you as an individual practice every day, that you can sort of give to the audience who's listening in their cars or at home, to inspire them if they want to do, what we're doing, or becoming an entrepreneur, starting their own business. What are some of the habits that you've formed?
So there's, I guess, 2 things that I would specifically focus on. One is I go to the gym every day. I wake up very early, somewhere depending on the day, obviously, but between 5 and 6 a.m. And try and go to the gym before my day starts. A lot of people drink coffee. I don't drink coffee. A lot of people do other things or meditate. I go to the gym. That's kind of what jump starts my day. So definitely being active and having some morning ritual that kind of jump starts your morning is important. The other thing that I would say is, obviously, my career hasn't been linear. I think a lot of people have a starting point of, where do I want to be in 5 to 10 years or 10 to 15 years? And then they kind of follow someone else's path. I think, obviously, in certain industries, potentially like finance, right? If you want to work in private equity, you can probably go to college, become an investment banker, and transition into private equity. But there's many careers that people don't think about, like venture capital, right? If you talk to 10 VCs, probably you'll get 10 different answers on what they did to get to where they are. And I think that's advice that I could give, all the listeners, which are, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to go into VC, if you want to be different, then you don't have to stick to anyone else's timeline or anyone else's linear trajectory into where they are. I think it's important to, stick to yourself, be yourself, do what makes you happy, follow your personal interests and follow your passion. And if you truly have that dedication and motivation to succeed, you'll get to wherever you want to be without following someone else's linear path.
Awesome. I love that, brother. So how can people reach you? What's the best ways to contact and get to know you guys and potentially partner?
Yeah, so I'm happy to receive emails on my work email. So it's Elias, ELIAS, @bnsgcapital.com.
Awesome. And the website is?
bnsgcapital.com. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much for being on the show, for your time. And it was really a pleasure talking to you and meeting you, brother.
Thank you so much. A pleasure.
Yeah.